28 months down, yeah, the industry's been bruised, but we're not here to fold, we're here to refuse. While others pause, we built the plays, now we're leading the charge in a brand new phase. You feel that tension, that's the pressure to grow. Hiring's messy, turnovers high and budgets low, but we don't panic, we adapt. We sharpen the edge and reload the map. This is the staffing playbook, strategy on tap. Steven brings the grit, G-Money brings the slap. Forget the fluff, forget the spin. We give you plays that actually win. From the break room floor to the boardroom seat, we've walked the walk, now we bring the heat. CDLs, forklifts, line leads, and execs. We place the best and fix the wrecks. Insight, hustle, leadership bold. No safe takes, just the truth told cold. Wanna scale your team, wanna close that gap. We got the data, the story, and the roadmap. So turn it up, lock it in. This is more than a podcast, it's a win. This is the staffing playbook. Let's get to work, it starts right now.
Welcome back to the Staffing Playbook, the show where we unpack real-world strategies to build stronger teams and stronger bottom lines. I'm Stephen Farrell, your host, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Geneviève Bourgeois. How are you today, Stephen?
Welcome. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm excellent.
Well, if you caught our episode on gaining client share, you know today's guest helped make it one of the most watched shows of the year. We learned so much from her, things that we even applied in our own organization. I'm thrilled to welcome back Kim Henderson, the founder and managing director of Cobalt Compass. Kim leads end-to-end training programs that equip staffing pros to create lasting customer relationships and give leaders the playbook for high-performing, results-driven teams. Kim, welcome back.
Steve, Geneviève, it's great to be back again. Thank you for inviting me in.
We are just thrilled to have you here. And
Yes,
like I mentioned in the
you.
intro, your episode with us was the most watched episode. We got the most feedback, positive feedback, and even there were things that we implemented into our own playbook. So just fantastic. Thank you.
Great to see it add some value. And if it can help somebody, ask that one question and lead them closer to a placement or closer to, working with a client better, then that's the goal. So good to hear.
Awesome. Well, today's topic, this is something that I want to give you a background on. So last few weeks talking to Kim, wanting to get Kim back here as soon as possible to share the knowledge that she has. And I asked Kim, Kim, is there a topic you are very passionate about that you don't often get to teach, whether it's on a podcast or in a workshop? And Kim, what topic did you tell me?
I said, Steve, I want to talk about client contracts and getting better client contracts, because I think that in our industry, especially when we're doing contract temporary work, we get so excited that, oh my gosh, we finally got the MSA, we finally got the customer, that oftentimes we just, gleefully sign whatever. And then the next thing you know, we find that, not only do we sign our life away, but we have money washing off the dock that we intentionally gave away. And then further, we find that there's a lot of processes that we signed up for and compliance items that we signed up for that we didn't even know about, and we don't have a process to handle. And I think that, contracts training is something that most staffing professionals don't get, and nor do they understand some of the terms and conditions to be aware of as they look through an agreement. They just sign it and hope and pray for the best. And you and I both know that hope is really only for small children, right? It's not really a strategy. So I said, this is something that's really important. And I learned a lot of lessons along the way. And got burned a couple of times. So with that, we said, hey, let's start to look at the business terms in a contract, right? Not the legal terms, because while all three of us here, play a lawyer, on TV and on our own, we're not lawyers, right? So we're not looking at those type of terms. We're looking at the business terms, things that impact our wallet, things that impact our processes and impact our client and candidate relationships. So it's something that's underrated, and it really does need to kind of, I think, move to the top, and folks need to learn a little bit better to get themselves better terms.
Yeah, I've got so many horror stories when it comes to contracts, and I wish I had this discussion with you when I got my first stint in staffing several years ago. Oh, and I'm sure we're going to peel back and talk about a few of these stories, but you're right about, most staffing professionals, they just go with, whatever they've got, whatever the company provides, and they don't understand the business jargon that's in the agreement. And often, even things are just overlooked because sometimes you've got a 9 to 29 page, agreement that you're working through, master service agreement, and you're committing to things that maybe you're not qualified to commit to, or it's going to cost you a lot more than what's worth when it comes to the business. And so this is going to be so fun. I know you don't have a PowerPoint today, like our last show, but we do have a document you supported that we'll lean into throughout the conversation. But this is something, if you're in staffing, you deal with customer contracts, listen in. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to learn a lot today.
Yes, we're going to learn about the landmines to avoid, right? And to your point, Steve, you made a great thought here. You can get a 29-page client agreement, and you don't necessarily have to read cover to cover 29 pages. I'm going to talk about the terms and business conditions that you need to go and be aware of that should jump out at you in the contract, so you can kind of maybe scan it, look for these potential areas, and then know how to navigate from there. So again, we're looking for landmines, right? As we go through this, things that can really trip us up. We don't necessarily have to read all 29 pages if we know what to look for and know what the landmines are.
All right. You need to teach us how to avoid these landmines, avoid these red flags. I mean, luckily, I did take a couple of really good classes in college, like business law. And if it's in writing, there's a contract, but this is why you've got to redline every single contract. And then on top of that, sales and negotiation class. Those were my two favorite classes. And it's helped me avoid a lot of bad contracts issues. But like you said, right now, like the biggest part is the business terms impacting your wallet, your processes, and your client and candidate relationships. All right, take us play by play.
Yeah. And we've got two goals, right? It's number one, understand the terms, right, that could be adverse to them so we can negotiate them. And then number two, to your point, John, you have to understand the terms so we can set up a process on the back end so we stay compliant. So really two goals are the reason, what's in it for me, right? If you're watching this, you're going, well, why do I care about this? Number one, you want to be able to negotiate adverse terms in your favor. Then number two, things that you have to sign up for, you want to create a process so you can stay compliant. So it doesn't come back on the back end where you're, as an example, chasing down accounts receivable that's, 120, 180 days old, and you're going, oh no, I've got to collect on this, or it's going to impact my commission. So that's what we're trying to do. Two goals with it.
Kim, can we start this conversation off with a personal story, a personal learning moment for me?
Go for it. We love the personal learning moments.
So we were up for renewal on our contract with a large customer, and new procurement director, lots of different terms in here, and one of the things they threw at us was any late order. So you place an order today, we have 48 hours to fill it, or I should say two business days. If we miss it just by one day, we would get a $40 fee that we'd have to pay back to the customer. And so this was in 2019. We were renegotiating the contract. We had no problem finding talent for this customer. They had great wages. We had a great pool. We had a great team. We'd worked with this customer for decades. Like, we thought, we'll never have to worry about that clause because we know what we're doing. Like, this is no problem. So guess what? We signed away. And this is, mind you, a high volume customer. We're talking 1,000 associates on assignment, temp to hire. And guess what happened in 2020, early 2020? There was something that called, was it COVID?
Yeah, wasn't
COVID
there
hit.
like a pandemic or something?
Yeah, it was this massive pandemic, right? And when the business came screaming back a couple months later, and there was just major shortage, we could not find the talent, and so we were late on just about, I mean, really every order for just months on end. And so they came asking for the bill at the end of the year, and we're talking close to $1 million. And it was like, that was something we never expected, and we would have never signed off on that clause if we had had any insight into the future. But now, presently, when I see a clause like that, I'm going to be like asking myself a question: can we afford this clause if we have another pandemic, right? And anything else that could happen. So that was a learning moment for me, and yeah, I'll be looking much closer at those clauses moving forward.
Steve, that story, Geneviève, he makes a great point. What we're looking when we sign a contract, we think about it in the here and the now and today. But sometimes what we don't realize is these have 2-year terms, 3-year terms, and that the business dynamics today could be radically different 3 years from now. So if it's a clause that's a little iffy, that you're going, I don't know if I can live up to that expectation, you may want to think about it. Okay, what happens if, to Steve's point, 2 years down the road, a year down the road, we're looking at a different environment? Is that really going to be something that we can handle? So great point. You can think about it for today, but also for the long term, a year from now, what happens when things change? Perfect.
That's right.
Perfect scenario.
Yeah. And so you plan for the worst. Can you afford it? Hope for the best. We were all hopeful. We did not plan for the worst. And you need to do that. I know I'm doing that. If worst case scenario, we don't meet up to these expectations, can we afford to meet the expectations?
Yeah, great story, and great lesson right there. Not a great story. I'll say it's a great lesson, bad story.
That's right.
I agree.
Well, I think Kim, you've got the stage. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll pop in with some questions. But I want you to walk us through negotiating these contracts, what to look for, some of those business terms. So let me get my screen shared here.
All right, outstanding. So actually, I think that the easiest way to kind of understand something and absorb it is to kind of break it down into steps. So I'd say that there's probably about 5 different areas of landmines, for lack of a better word, and then there's a bunch of components that go under each one. So, we mentioned earlier that this is important for 2 reasons. A, if we know what to look for, we can go and negotiate these adverse conditions and try to get them out of there. And then B, we can go and whatever we're signing up for from a process standpoint, we can put something in place, whether it be with account managers, recruiters, in the back office, so we can follow it, not have it come back and kind of bite us on the back end. So the first category, easy stuff, right? The basics. Number 1, pricing. Need to understand the pricing, right? And can you negotiate better pricing? I look at it this way. I always try. And what I'd say for all of these things we're going to go through, questions are free, right? Closed mouths don't get fed. So you have nothing to lose by having discussions with your client on all of these items. Particularly pricing is just something that hits us right between the eyes, because that's our wallet first and foremost. Okay. Direct client contact, right? We see this often with MSP contracts. Understand direct contact. Can you have it? Can you not have it? Is that something you want to talk about with your client? Also, to some of those basics, submittal and interview process, right? What's their submittal process? Do they want 3 submittals for every rec, or 2 submittals? Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can't do that, right? If you can't find that type of candidate flow, maybe you don't want to sign up for that. Do they want you to have a right to represent letter from all your candidates? I've had clients that have done that to us, and while we couldn't negotiate it out, it's a bit of a pain, but we had to put a process in place to get right to represents from all of our candidates. Simple things, they want the resume in a certain format, right? Are you limited on your number of resume submissions? Maybe it's, again, a larger customer, and they say, we don't want more than 2 resumes from each supplier, okay? Do you know if you can have subcontractors in the program? This became quite quite important to us as we were working a lot of IT roles, and we didn't necessarily have all the talent on hand. We were going through third parties to get people that were like Oracle e-business suite or SAP, and in some cases Java developers. So if you feel like you need to use subcontractors and independent 1099 contractors to make a go of this and be able to get people placed, then you need to have that ability in the contract, right? So that's something definitely I would put a star by that one, because a lot of people need that to make their business run and get candidate flow. Okay.
Yeah.
Term and termination. We always wanted to get the right to terminate a contract. So the contracts tend to be written very one-sided, right? Geneviève, it's all about the client, what's best for them. And here we are kind of standing out in the cold, all wet in the rain. And we want to try to make it a little bit more equitable. And while it went through, contracts go through how they can terminate, we also want the ability to terminate, right? Because let's say if the relationship, we can't be a good business partner, it turns out not to be a good fit for us, we want the ability to give notice and terminate the contract if we're not a good fit for it, right? That's something I always want to be able to give ourselves an out. But we want to understand, right? Let's say we do terminate the contract, or let's say they terminate the contract on us. What happens to our contractors on assignment? Right? Are they going to take them and give them to another supplier? Or do we get to just let them live out their natural contract length? Again, things you'd want to be aware of and try to negotiate in your favor. And then another basic is insurance requirements. This one would start to become a really big onerous thing for us. And it was like they would put in these massive insurance requirements, and we didn't quite have the coverage for that. So we either had to go back to our carrier, right, and increase the coverage, which cost us money, or try to basically go to the customer and say, hey, why do you need these type of insurance requirements? Or why do you need automobile liability at this level when our contractors aren't going to be driving a car? Again, having just these open-ended conversations to understand the why behind it, where they're coming from, and then having them understand, where we're coming from, and see if you can meet in the middle. So those are just some of the basics, right? As you look at a contract that really should hit you between the eyes and go, whoa, kind of need to be aware of this. Okay. And then we'll get a little deeper in the next segment.
Yeah. These
think of those. Have you seen some of those before, Geneviève and Steve, in your contracts? And you're going, oh gosh, insurance. Oh boy.
Yes. And like I've said this on previous episodes, and no deal is better than a bad deal. Okay. And that's where, especially where it comes to like the termination, because you need to be able to make sure that this is going to be something that's working in favor of both parties as actual genuine partners, not just being one-sided. And that's the thing about contracts, like you noted, everything is more so, hey, for the client. But at the end of the day, you have to go and think about, hey, what's my WIFM? What's in it for me? What am I willing to do? So I love this.
I'm so glad you said that, because let's face it, we will not be a fit for every client out there. It's a statistical impossibility for that to be the case. So realizing that, if you look at a contract objectively, right, and you kind of scorecard all these terms and what they're willing to change and what they're not willing to change, it should start to become crystal clear pretty objectively if you can be a good business partner and you can live up to the expectations that are going to be placed upon you in these contracts. And if you can't, that's okay. They're going to have a lot more respect for us, right? If we say, hey, we can't quite make it work with these terms of rules of engagement. So what we'd like to do is, maybe introduce you to another staffing supplier that probably could match this. And then we'll check back with you. See how things are going in 3 months, see if you're getting the candidates that you need, and see if you're not, maybe you're willing to relook at some of these contract terms. So never be afraid to walk away. To your point, Geneviève, I agree with you, because they're going to have so much more respect for your honesty and your business professionalism than if you just try to go, well, let's hold our breath, sign it, and cringe and just try to do the best we can and fake it, because usually what happens, we crash and burn. Let's face it, right?
It's absolutely okay to have non-negotiables, especially when it comes to a contract, and especially when it comes to running your own business or with any business, because
Right.
it's your reputation, right, Kim?
Yeah, and we're here to make money. Staffing companies are not 501c3s and charitable organizations. We're here to make money. And if it ends up not making sense because the markups are low and fee structures are, that we'll talk about in a minute, end up really eating into your margin at the end of the day. If you're making a 10% margin, you're going, wait a minute, this isn't worth it. I can take my inventory to some other client where I can go and make a 27% GP, margin at the end of the day. So guys, we've actually, where I came from, we had situations like that where we work with a large national customer. And by the time we built out a pro forma, I went through every fee, every discount, every back office hire, every process, every piece of compliance we had to put in place and put it into a pro forma. We were making like a 10% margin, right? And we had to go back to the customer and have a discussion to explain to them, here's where we are. And I remember one of them kind of gave us some concessions. And then there was another one that said, sorry, this is what it is. You take it or you leave it. That customer was actually IBM. And we said, well, while we appreciate it, we can't do this anymore. And we severed our contract in a very polite way. Because think about it, you're giving your inventory away, right? Our inventory is our candidate pool. Yep. And, do you really want to do that for 10% or would you rather do it for a 27% margin? So,
yeah, you call this the basics, which I agree, but it's interesting. Each one of these can really come with a lot of legwork, and some can be a non-starter. Right. I look at number 3. This is a common practice with VMS and MSP contracts where you can't have direct client contact, which it's your people you're sending out there. You want to make sure they're getting taken care of. If there's some retention issues that are going on at the site level, maybe with their particular supervisor, like if they were your client, you would call a meeting and talk about it, share the feedback, and work together on right sizing. But when you're stuck into a no contact agreement, what I've done is first push back on that, and if that doesn't work, I go, okay, I want the MSP or the VMS and myself, I want us to meet quarterly. I want to have a QBR, and let's talk about what's working, what's not. And I want to get feedback from the client, from you, and then I want to give you feedback that we're getting from our team. And I want us to get aligned and agree to respond to that feedback. And I've never been told no when it comes to, well, if we can't be in touch with the client, let's have meetings ourselves. Between the MSP provider and us.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned as well, subcontractors, 1099s, that can be a great candidate pool. And if you're precluded from tapping into that per an agreement, it can really limit your ability, to deliver. So that's definitely something to look at that, got burned on that one before. So,
yeah. No, this is great, Kim. All right. So what do you want to move into next?
Let's talk about, let's talk about where we start digging in hard, discounts and fees. Okay. Always understand, what our MSP and or VMS fees are going to be. That's pretty key. It factors into your pricing, right? And then, how are they going to take the fee? Do they take it off of each invoice when they remit? How are they collecting their fee? So understanding that's key. Tenure discounts for contractors on assignment. Really, every large customer seemed to have that in there. It was like, so after a year or after 6 months, we're going to go and we're going to reduce their rate or we're going to want a reduction of 1% or 2% off the bill rate. These can really add up quick and eat into your margin. So if there are tenure discounts, hey, it's great to get them out, right? If you can, but if you can't get them out, have a discussion with the customer and at least get them reduced or at least get the timeline elongated. You don't want a tenure discount starting at 6 months or even a year because, gosh, you're finally figuring out how the account works, right? You're starting to hit your stride and actually, all that time and effort you put into it. So you don't want to start to take a haircut that early. If you have to do it at all, try to do it at 1.5 years or 2 years. So key thing on tenure discounts. Again, understanding how much and when it goes into effect. Rebates. Sometimes there's annual rebates based on revenue we're billing. Let's say we're billing a customer, you know, 5 million a year, 10 million a year, and they'll put these thresholds. At 5 million, the rebate is 1%. At 7 million, it's 2%. 10 million, it's 3%. Again, those can really eat into your business. So try to have those discussions, negotiate that out, or at least negotiate those numbers downward, right? The next one is the one that actually makes me laugh. The prompt payment discount. Get that out of there at all costs. Do not accept the prompt payment discount, whatever you do, because here's what happens. What do you think happens, Geneviève? Actually, before I say it, what happens when you accept the prompt payment discount?
Ooh, oh, if let's just say I'm Mr. or Mrs. Client. I'm going to make sure I pay this, and then this way I can save up more money in the back end, right?
Permanent discount.
Here's what happens. So we accept what happened to me personally in a contract. We say, okay, we'll accept your 2% prompt payment discount. So clients say, I'll pay you within 15 days, but because I'll pay you in 15 days, I'm going to take a 2%, you know, off of the remittance, off of what I'm paying you. Well, what happens is we on the staffing side, we sign up for it and go, oh, that sounds great. Getting our money in 15 days. We'll take the 2% haircut. But in reality, big companies, next thing you know, they're paying you in reality 30 days, 45 days, maybe even 60 days. So they're not living up to the prompt payment schedule, but yet you took the 2% or 3% or 1% haircut, and now you're stuck. You've taken a reduction, and they're no longer paying you in net 10, net 15. They've slid the ball out to, you know, net 30, net 45. So I have never seen that particular term in a contract work out well for the staffing company. It tends to work out great for the client, but not for the staffing company. They don't hold up their end of the bargain. So run far, run fast from that one.
Oh, I've seen it, especially with contractors, or like we used to call them runners. But it was one of those things. Okay, so for the first like 2 to 3 months, everything would be promptly paid within the 15 days. And then next thing you know, they get more runners on or contractors. And then next thing you know, a few months out, starts to get delayed. And I've seen some people get very angry about it because they're like, why did this happen?
Yeah. Exactly. And you're right. The more people you get billable out there, it becomes probably harder for them to pay within that 10-day or 15-day window. And inevitably it just keeps, you know, sliding out farther and farther. So I would say definitely just get that one out of there. Don't even mess with it. Another one that really can kill us is the right to hire conversion schedule. So typically, all these contracts are going to start out by saying, we want to convert your temps, your contractors at 90 days. And what I would say to that is, again, heck no, right? Because by the time we actually do all that legwork on the sales side, figuring out the account, and the recruiting side, finding the candidates, getting them out there, think about it. We're barely making any money at the 90-day point, right? That's probably just when we start. If you add in all the back office costs, all the SG&A, that's when we start to make some money off of these folks on assignment, right? The last thing I want to do is hand them over at 90 days. So what I'd say is to anybody, you really don't want to hand them over before 6 months, really a year or 9 months if you can go that far. But I would say 100% negotiate that section, have that discussion with your client, explain to them that by the time you load in all of our SG&A, all of our costs, everything it takes us to recruit, we really are just starting to go and hit a positive revenue stream on these contractors at day 90, right around that point. So we can't convert them at that point. So again, shoot for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and a conversion schedule around that. So very, very important one, because you just get in the churn cycle, right, Steve?
I've seen a new trend lately. It's just driving me crazy. I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm seeing a lot of right to hire without conversion terms. We will take your people whenever we want.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve. And those are the conversations that we want to have, that, you know, no, this isn't, you know, we're basically, that's finding them for free, right? Because if they go and take a person after, you know, a week on assignment, we've basically handed them over for almost free. And again, there's a lot of cost involved with recruiting and sales that we can't do that. So to your point, it's best to try to sit down, have a two-way conversation, get the client to understand everything that goes into it on our side, and the fact we just can't hand them over willy-nilly, at their whim and at their mercy, whether it's day 2 or day 22. We can't do that, right?
Yeah, and you have to have. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was about to say it takes about 37 hours to go and hire a candidate to go and put them into a placement. Okay. And plus the advertising costs when it comes to all the different job boards. Where did you find them? You've got to go vet them. And then you got to think about all the the manpower, and depending on which field you're in. I mean, 37 is just like a national average. But if it's like DOT or IT, you've got to get so many more details. And I got to tell you, it's definitely more than 37 hours. So
we're paying a contractor, we're paying recruiters, we're paying salespeople, we're paying people in the back office. Like you said, there's cost of job boards, there's cost of the CRM, there's so many, there's cost of carrying insurance for contractors and payroll and taxes, all those things that we know about. And all that's baked into our burden, right? Which is typically anywhere from, 18% to 23%, depending on the company and where you're doing business. So to that point, it's like we can't just hand people over quickly like that, because we wouldn't be in business if we did. So to your point, Geneviève, I love what you said, breaking down those costs, because math doesn't lie. And I think what I found over my staffing tenure is the more I could put numbers to something when I was having a discussion with clients about being flexible and negotiating, the better it went. Because I wasn't just trying to negotiate on vaporware and subjectivity. The more numbers I put to it, like what you said, Geneviève, hours, days, cost associated with things, the more it resonated with them and the more willing they were to be flexible. So I love that you said that. Thank you.
And so even Stephen knows this, and Stephen can go and speak about this, but
Did you say even Stephen?
Even Stephen. Even Stephen can go and speak about this, because one of the flyers that I think is the most used is our true cost flyer, because there's a lot of hard costs and a lot of soft costs that come with actually hiring a candidate. And the thing is, it's like, here, we're assuming all of this for you, but we also have to be able to make up the money in the back end.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like John, you have all that statutory stuff, federal, state unemployment, workers' comp, liability. And then, like you said, the softer stuff of, again, hiring recruiters, getting them up to speed so they can even find the people, hiring salespeople, all those costs. So I think, to your point, John, and we must have been trained in the same school, I would always go over that I called it, the cost involved sheet as well with my customers. So they just didn't think I was fabricating these numbers out of the air, that they saw that these are truly costs that we often, a lot of them by law, that we have to pay for, right? And to that point, we have to cover our costs, then we have to make some money, or we're not there, right? We're not in business. So great point.
Yeah.
All right. Hopefully everybody out there is still with us on contracts, because we know it's not the most glamorous topic, but let's get to maybe something a little more fun. Getting paid. That's what we want.
Yes, show me the
That's
money.
What it's all about. Okay. Payment terms. Can you reduce them? So, Geneviève, Steve, you've seen it. It's not uncommon for someone to try to say, well, I'm going to pay you in 90 days. I'm going to pay you in 60 days. Steve shaking his head. Yeah, try to reduce that. Really, it's all about DSO, days sales outstanding. The quicker we get the cash, the better it is for our business, right? And that's any business. It's like cash is king, and getting cash in the door fast. There's nothing more important. So if it's 90 days, go down to 30. Right? Maybe ultimately you end up at 45, worst case scenario, you end up at 60, which is still not that good. But I would always strive for like 30 and trying to get there as best I could. Right? Because what happens when you have 90-day or 60-day terms? Next thing you know, you're out at 120, and it ends up being slow pay. So really something to constantly negotiate. Short, brief payment terms. Hopefully you can get the 30 days.
Yeah, it's a must negotiation. You think about, as firms grow, not only are we paying our associates, typically on a week by week basis, but we're paying the payroll tax on that, right? Sometimes twice a week, it's being automatically deducted. And so when you're out
Yes.
60 days plus, like you're accruing interest, on that payroll that you just can't make up.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Depending on, are you using an employer of record, or are you using a factoring company, or do you have a bank line of credit? You're right. We're financing a lot of this, and there's interest. There's concerns that we have to think about, there as well. So absolutely, that first bullet, can't speak enough about. But number 2 is pretty strong as well. That's a tight contender of something we need to understand. How to train contractors to do their timekeeping. Because again, if it's a large customer and maybe there's a VMS in place, they need to understand how to do it, and so do we. Because if timekeeping's wrong, that means we can't invoice, or that means the entire thing is wrong and we don't get paid, right? And it starts to elongate our payment terms. So again, understanding to be able to train them to do timekeeping and do it right. How do we submit our invoicing? Is it done through the VMS? Maybe it's not. Maybe there's not a VMS or MSP in place, but what is the process to submit invoicing? Is it weekly? Some companies want it bi-weekly. I've had some that want it done monthly, and we never liked that. On one consolidated invoice, we always wanted to do it monthly so the clock would start ticking on our 30 days so we could get paid. But we really need to understand that. And not only do we need to understand that, this is where the wheels fall off. And this happened, where I was. The account manager may understand it. For some reason, there's a very poor handoff from the account manager and the training to the back office, right? They send the back office an email. Here's how timekeeping and invoicing is done with client X. And there's a disconnect. There's a miss. The next thing you know, we've got a bad AR problem because our back office didn't do it correctly. But we can't necessarily blame it on them. It's incumbent on us to sit down and meet with them, put together, it could be a down and dirty document. Here's the process. Here's what it should look like. Here's what you need to do, for timekeeping and invoicing, and make sure they understand it. It's that little bit of front end communication is going to save you mountains of work and hours and hours and hours of redoing invoices and collecting on AR, right? So been there and done that. Connect with the back office up front so they understand how to do this the right way.
Always make the AR person your best friend.
That's a fact. That's right. And they need to understand how to do it for every single account. So purchase orders. I've actually worked with some customers that are like, Kim, we're going to issue a purchase order and to encumber the funds, to show the funds are encumbered for this particular contractor. And by the way, don't start your contractor until the PO is cut. Good to know. You wouldn't want to start a contractor, something goes wrong with the PO and the funds aren't encumbered, and next thing you know, on the back end, you have a problem, right? So can you start a contractor without a PO? Will they generate one, right? Overtime. This is another area where staffing companies really, and account managers really don't understand and don't take the time to look at this term in a contract. I'd put a star by this one as well. Let's face it, our contractors may work overtime, right? We need to bill for every single hour that they work. Some contracts are written from clients that they won't pay for overtime. Whoa, okay, that's bad. Because either then you have to control how many hours your contractors work and stay on top of that, which is hard to do. Or if they do work overtime and you can't bill for it, next thing you know, you're losing money on them pretty darn quickly. So really important that the client and the client contract says that they will pay and bill for every hour of overtime. And there's even more. Sometimes we have to pay them based on their classification at time and a half. If we have to pay them at time and a half, we need to be able to bill them at time and a half. So again, read overtime very, very carefully to make certain that you, whatever you have to do by law, pay people overtime at time and a half, that you can bill for every single hour worked at that correct rate so you get reimbursed.
Yeah, overtime is...
Geneviève.
Go ahead, Geneviève.
Oh, no, I'm just, I've seen messes before.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen it where it's like, oh no, they would go and cover, even if it was just like, what, like not even time and a half, but like time and a quarter. And even if that contractor or that runner was working an extra 10 hours, that's still a large financial burden. And that was coming out of the actual business.
Yeah, and
out of your
commission. Yeah, out of your commission, out of your pocket. Exactly. Because guys, great point, Geneviève. What happens when any one of these areas on this screen, when this goes sideways, right? And we don't get paid and there ends up being a write-off, a huge misconception or misinterpretation related to overtime and you know, fees and things like that. What ends up happening is it comes out of our commission check. It gets backed out, right?
Mhm.
You know, we mentioned up above MSP fees. We had a situation years ago with our MSP clients where our back office forgot to take the MSP fees out of our commissions for a year and a half. Then they discovered their mistake and went all and said, we're going to give you an option of two paychecks to remove all of these MSPs taking back commissions because of that. Yeah. So a little painful. And then that has your sales folks and your recruiters pretty darn unhappy. So again, the more you can communicate with the back office and do check-ins along the way, do a 1 month check-in, do a 3 month, a 6 month check-in. How's it going? Are you struggling with any of the timekeeping or invoicing with this particular client? Is there anything that now that you're in it, you know, Mr. or Ms. back office that we need to address with the customer? So again, it's behooves us to do it because ultimately, to your point, Geneviève, it ends up coming out of our pocket if something doesn't get paid, and nobody likes that, right?
Oh, I've seen people who they went probably about a month and a half without an actual paycheck because they had to go and pay back things that they were already paid for. And you don't plan for that. A lot of people don't. And so it was a huge financial issue for them. And they were actually one of our best people. And we ended up losing them over that. But it's also, they didn't set up the contract right, but they also weren't talking to our AR team.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. It's kind of the starting point's the contract, then following it all the way through communication. So everyone in your organization is connected to this and gets it and has a process. This last bullet, contractor expenses. This is another area where a lot of companies kind of don't do such a great job. And let's face it, let's say you're healthcare staffing and you have traveling RN case managers, right? And they're traveling every week. Or I've had IT people that travel. Make certain you understand how the client wants these expenses submitted to them, how frequently, what their parameters are for, you know, flights and hotels and meals, and make sure the contractors understand that. Make sure there's some type of a stopgap in place or something to help your contractors to stay compliant, right? Because if it's $500 stipend to get on a plane and they're buying $800 tickets, you're not going to be reimbursed for that. So again, have a process to understand not only how it's billed, how the client wants it billed, but what their parameters are, you know, for expenses, right, and amounts, and then explain to your contractors how to stay compliant with this, right? Big one right here where I've watched a lot of money wash off the dock due to sloppy processes, right?
100%.
Right.
Yeah, I like your caution here. Improper timekeeping and invoicing has a cascading effect leading to outstanding AR, rework, and collections. Do it right the first time.
I know. And doing it right the first time can sometimes take time as we set things up with a new client, but you're going to save so much more time on the back end by not having all those issues. Okay. So, all right, so let's move into the next category where they tend to, you know, where we can get bitten and we don't even realize it. Run far and run fast from the first one. We want this out of our contracts, right? We're staffing companies. We're not, you know, IBM or Accenture or Deloitte, where we go in and do projects that have deliverable language in them and getting paid at milestones. We don't do this. We get paid for every hour that our people work, right? So we want to get rid of deliverable language and getting paid at milestones. We don't want to write work instructions or do like wide scale analysis and recommendations. I've seen that in a lot of contracts that I've had. I'm like, no, we're not a software provider. We're not going to come in, and it's common in IT placement, right? We're not going to look at your system and recommend X, Y, or Z. We don't do that. So we want to get that out of there, right?
Leave that up to the contractor.
Yeah, exactly. Service guarantees, right? Again, negotiate these out, run far and run fast. I've seen it where they wanted me to give them, you know, free replacements, free work, or return the fees, right? Oh, if this doesn't work, we reserve the right to have you return the fees 6 months from now. No, absolutely not. You signed off on a timesheet, Mr. Client. You can say this in a nice way. You approve the work. Signing the timesheet is, in essence, an approval of the work, that the work is satisfactory. You can't come back 6 months from now because your software implementation didn't quite go the way you thought it would, or there's glitches in it. We don't do that. Again, we're a time and material staffing company. So we definitely want to go and negotiate these items. A couple more here, guys, that are important. Non-solicitation, right? Let's say it says we're not going to recruit their people out of their organization. We like to change and modify this to say, if your people come to us through, an advertisement, through a job board, through LinkedIn, they come to us, this is not valid, right?
That's right.
And a lot of customers were willing to go and do that. So I would say, again, put a star on this one. Don't get yourself caught. If their people come to us, right, we should be able to place them. We shouldn't be actively recruiting out of there, but they come to us, we should be able to place them.
Not to mention, I do agree, not to mention, we use a non-solicitation in our agreement for our customer not to recruit our talent, right? It's often you have an on-site that just becomes an extension of the HR team. They built a great relationship and they just see the value in this individual. And they're like, we have an opening, and our HR generalists like come on board. Like, we don't want to stop anyone from getting that, but they apply on their own. That's one thing, but to solicit our talent, we try to prevent that.
Yeah, great one. Audit. Geneviève, Steve, I think you've probably been on the receiving end where someone from a client company goes, okay, I want a zip file of these 10 contractors and I want to see all your onboarding paperwork. Oh boy, wow, we didn't have a process for audit. Oh wow, we don't even have all this stuff. And the next thing you know, because they want it like within 24 hours, you don't have it, you're not compliant, and you end up on a probation, or they could potentially kick you off of the vendors list and supplier list if they want. So again, understand what they're going to audit, what they want you to keep track of, because this has become very, very common. And we want to have a process, right? So whatever they're going to audit, that we're in the back office tracking it. So key term right there. And then to your point, Steve, earlier you mentioned performance metrics and scorecards, right? Know how you're going to be scorecarded. This should not be, a mystifying situation. It should be very clear on how we're going to be scorecarded, what performance metrics we have to live up to, right? And how we're going to achieve it. And Geneviève, you'll love this. If you can't do it, don't agree to it. Don't just wish and hope. Wish and hope is not a strategy. Geneviève said it, right? Don't sign up to it.
It's so true. And the things you've got to know, where you're being measured, okay, and like how you're going to be scored. And if you can't live up to it, don't do it.
Exactly. You're setting yourself up for failure, right? Okay, final category, the final one of terms, that landmines that we can fall into that can really burn us to be aware of. Look in the contract where it starts talking about onboarding, right? That's where, again, we don't want to read 29 pages. Look at the onboarding section, and we talk about looking at performance criteria and fees and all that good stuff. So are they going to generate a work order, right? For an internal approval that kind of goes through the system. That's common with VMSs, not all the time. And know their onboarding requirements, right? What are the background requirements, right? Are we going to have to do drug screening? Are we going to have to do fingerprinting? I've had that before, because we want to make certain that our candidates are aware of this before they even interview there. I've seen candidates that this was not covered in the match call, and the candidates going, whoa, I don't want to be drug screened. Oh, I don't want to be fingerprinted, but the candidate needs to know this up front, and the back office needs to know this as well, so they understand the background requirements. And if we have to use a specific provider, or if we can use our provider of choice, big area right here where the wheels can fall off and we can get, non-compliant, right? Usually companies have all these, I'll call them confidentiality agreements, non-disclosures, things like that the contractors need to sign. So understand what those documents are so we can have them ready, get the contractors to sign them. But again, a lot of issues right there with contractors that don't want to adhere to strenuous onboarding requirements. And then finally, know what's going to disqualify someone from an assignment, right? We need to understand that. So if their background comes back horrible, was it just that they got a DUI, 15 years ago, or did they go and rob a bank, right? Two very different things. So understand what's going to disqualify them potentially. And then, of course, recognizing the day one start information. That's key, guys. We don't want to just send them out there and, hey, go to the front door and knock on it. Guide them through that. Onboarding, Geneviève is always says where the wheels can fall off, right? You have a clunky, unorganized onboarding process for these folks. Not only is it going to upset your customer, right, and have them think, oh, geez, they're already starting the relationship off bad. Your candidate's going to go, wow, this is an unorganized mess. Maybe I didn't make the right move coming here. Maybe I should stay where I'm at. Maybe I made a mistake. So this is really where dotting the I's, crossing the T's, care and feeding is pretty darn important in onboarding. Okay.
Oh, there were times I would actually go and it's like, all right, I'd be there like 15, 20 minutes early at the actual onsite, waiting for the actual candidate, and I would go walk them up. And if I could not do that, I would go and take a video and be like, here, this is the entrance.
I like that.
You're going to go this way. And everyone here, we all have cameras on our phones.
Yeah.
And just actually, if I couldn't do it, I would go do it physically. All right. And be like, all right, you're going to go here. You're going to go to this elevator. I recommend the third one because this is the one that goes up to the floors from this to that. But just try to eliminate any and all confusion.
Yes. Eliminating what can go wrong, eliminating them arriving frazzled and late on their first day. I love that. I would thank you. I never would have thought of that. Actually trying to go and take a video. Hey, when you walk in, you're going to need to go and go here and go there, kind of show them the video. Because the larger a company is, the more the check-in procedures and getting started procedures are a little more complex. So I love that. I never would have thought of that, but great job.
Thank you.
So, Steve, best practices. You want to talk about best practices for a minute? Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. I think we mentioned this early on, guys. Every dollar counts. It counts not only to your company, but it counts, what's in it for you. It counts to your wallet, your commission check, right? What you're taking home, for your livelihood. So what I'd say is when in doubt, ask. When in doubt, have a conversation. We talked about some of the things to run far and fast from. Sit down and have those conversations. But what I'd say to the point here is this is not something you do over email. Email is really, misinterpretation. It's cold. It's impersonal. People are much easier, more inclined to say no. Right? It's a lot better to have it with someone either over video or in person, to sit down and go through all the terms. And again, kind of explain. You can't really explain in an email where you're coming from or the why behind needing to negotiate a term. So again, do this through some medium where you're in person and you're looking at one another. Video is great. That way you can kind of get a two-way conversation going. Do not do it over email. You won't have a great conversion rate. And what I'd say, guys, is you're probably not going to get every single term to your liking, right? It's called compromise. It's called negotiation. Figure out what your non-negotiables are. We talked about some of the tough ones up there. And then, those are to your point, your lines in the sand, like Geneviève says, hey, if as a company, we have these 5 non-negotiables and they can't bend or be flexible as a client, then maybe they're not the right customer for us, right? So kind of understand where you're willing to pivot and flex and where you're not, right? And then finally, making sure that not only are your salespeople trained on this, if you're a leader and you're trained yourself on it, but that you're drawing that line and connecting the back office into this so they really understand and that you're doing a continual follow-up with them at various intervals. Because again, you tell it to them one time, they're working with 15, 30, 100 different customers. Back office may not understand, they may forget, they're only human, and there are partners, right? It's a partnership. So make certain you're connecting the back office to all of this, okay? So things that help me and some traps that I fell into along the way.
All right. So communication is key. I think that is the biggest takeaway from all of this.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think another big takeaway, John, like you said, if we can't make it work, walk away from it, right? We're not a fit for everybody. And again, ask, have the conversation. and be aware. Don't just sign a piece of paper that's given to you, because like Steve's horror story that he gave, and we all have horror stories. I have them too. You do as well. Not paying attention to these landmines really can kind of blow up on us and cause us to lose money and lose relationships too.
Kim, you just brought so much knowledge today. I think this will be our next most listened to episode.
I hope it's helpful.
It's extremely helpful. And, you know, even for myself, I'm looking at these. A lot of these are like, okay, yep, doing that, no problem. Others are, yeah, I should probably be doing that. But
Yes.
to your point, really what's key in all of this is the conversation, right? Everything's negotiable to an extent, but being a keyboard warrior is not going to help you. You know, get on the phone, get in Teams meeting, visit the client in person, and have the conversation. And, you know, just explaining when they want 90-day payment terms, explaining how much that actually costs us as a business versus them. You know, when it comes to conversion terms, explaining that, you know, look, we want to do what's best for you and for the associate, but also, you know, we don't break even until that 90-day mark, right? And so when you have that conversation, people, you know, they might take a hard stance and say, well, if you want to do business with me, you have to agree to the terms. But others might go, wow, I didn't actually see your side. Now I understand why you need 30-day payment terms or less, because you're going to be paying interest on this payroll. You pay your people weekly. You're not just every other vendor in our building where they can accept those 90-day payment terms for you. You're putting cash out every week for these associates. So yeah, I see that. I understand. We'll work with you on payment terms.
Yeah, we're covering the float, right? It's float. And I think too, to the point that we talked about earlier, all three of us, is, you know, the more numbers you can put to it, or just data, you know, that you have that conversation, it becomes real at that point, where it's not just, you know, you throwing out some arbitrary wish or hope or term that you want to change it to. When you start to show them, again, the why behind it, they'll tend to be a little bit more agreeable, right? And I think too, hopefully what we were able to do today is eliminate the need for someone to read a 29-page contract. Hopefully they can take this as a guide and maybe just go to the sections, right?
Yeah.
And have all this information and read and go, that looks good. Or this could be a potential, you know, dumpster fire on this term, and we need to change it.
That's right.
Well, knowing Steven, he's going to go throw it into AI and look for these key terms.
Yeah, Geneviève, great. And look at you. You've been throwing in some hardcore nuggets today. I didn't necessarily, that didn't come to the forefront of my mind, but you're right. AI can help us today to be able to go through and spot these terms to, again, where we don't have to sit and read, take home a 29-page contract and read it at night and start underlining things like it's, you know, 1989. Use AI to help you, you know, dig it all out. That way it's right there, and you've saved, you know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes of time.
And
Geneviève, you read me like a book. I'm literally taking this document that Kim sent me. Thank you, Kim. I'm holding on to this. And this is the parameters I'm going to insert into AI, and then I'm going to upload the agreement and say, okay, look for these, these parameters.
Yeah. And also, like, putting in your non-negotiables, like, these are my non-negotiables. Please scan and review and highlight if they are. And like, that's using technology to go and help out. But like, I mean, that's even just like, hey, take a video of how to walk into a building if you can't do it yourself, because
I love it.
You know, maybe some people are not morning people. Okay. But
I'm with you. But yeah, and train your teams, right, guys? It's Geneviève, Steve. It's one thing if like the three of us know how to do it, but if your team doesn't know how to do it, you don't want learned helplessness, right? Where the team's got to come to you, you know, hey, Geneviève, can you help me with this contract? You want to start to teach them how to do this so they can be self-sufficient. They learn all of this. So again, we've got to bundle it up and share our knowledge to our team. So we're not the only, you know, guy or gal holding the fort down when it comes to contracts, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
All right. I want to wrap this up with one last thing for Kim. Kim, you have a special announcement, something that you're going to be kicking off very soon here. The summer staffing series. I want to have you take 2 minutes, explain what you're doing, and what people should expect and look forward to.
Yes, great. Thank you, Steve and Geneviève. So starting June 4, if you guys are familiar with the staffing shark, Richard Rosner, he and I are teamed up for the summer school staffing series. Say that fast five times, right? And it'll be 4 sessions kicking off June 4 to really help folks from a sales perspective go out, get new business, find new revenue streams, diversify what they're doing. And some of the topics we're going to cover are first, if you're not selling contract services, how do you do it? How to sell contract services? Not only that, what do you ask for? What do you look for? And how do you fund it and pay for it and manage it, right? So that'll be the first thing we do. Second will be, now that you know how to sell contract services, another great diversification is selling statement of work project business, right? So we'll cover that in week 2. And then week 3 is going to be more about, well, we have customers, but do we do a decent job at retaining them and building loyalty? So we'll do a 10-step plan to building client retention and loyalty. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with, value add and gaining client share that I know, Steve, you and Geneviève and I have talked quite a bit about. But yeah, we're going to have fun. Let's face it, summer school, we think about back to our days in school, whole semester worth is like, oh my God, this is like, mind numbing. We're going to distill it down into summer school sessions, about an hour and a half each. So again, help everybody. Sales is a challenge today for everyone in staffing. Help us amplify and get more business from our customers and diversify some of our revenue streams. So we'll see everyone June 4 on that.
That is fabulous. All right, now can we find you digitally, physically? Where are we doing this? Where are we posting? Is it going to be at?
That is a great, thank you, Geneviève. So starting next week, the Shark and I will be posting on LinkedIn, advertising the event. And with that, there'll be registration links. And it'll guide you right through the process. So look for us next week on LinkedIn to kick that off. And we'll have the entire month of May for folks to get signed up and start to join in on the events that begin June 4. So
and
next
we'll
week.
We'll update the show notes to include that link for everybody when you provide that. But that is just, it couldn't have come at a better time where the industry is still trending down. We're 28 consecutive months down, and so everybody's looking for ways to grow wallet share, to bring on new clients. And knowing you and knowing Shark, you guys are going to bring the tactics to the forefront that people can use and apply and see that return immediately. So sign me up. I can't wait for your summer series, a little mini summer school for sales. I can't wait.
Ditto.
We'll make it fun too. But thank you so much, Stephen and Geneviève, for inviting me in again. Really appreciate it. Always awesome to talk to you and talk to your viewers. And anything we can do that makes staffing easier and smoother and more fruitful, that's why we're here.
Thank you.
Could not agree more.
And before we end, thank you, Kim. We are in the next coming weeks, we're going to have a multi-series on the podcast. We're bringing on HR leaders to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to staffing. So we are going to just let them do a tell-all of what they really enjoy about staffing, what they dislike about staffing. And then we're going to bring it around full circle and ask, what are things that as staffing agencies we can do to better support these HR leaders in their overall employment strategy and recruitment strategy. And so it's going to be a tell-all, but they're going to come back and share some insights for the industry of how we can better serve them. And so we'll have some of the top experts in the industry. We're going to have we're trying to bring on someone from the VMS space as well. So buckle up. It's going to be a lot of fun, and that's going to be coming in the next few weeks.
Love it.
All right. Thanks again, Kim Henderson. Again, if you're looking for Kim, you can find her at cobaltcompasssolutions.com, as well as on LinkedIn. Just search Kim Henderson. She'll be the first one that pulls up. So Kim, it's been an absolute treat. Thank you again. Can't wait to have you back on again to drop some more insights.
Thank you, Geneviève. Thank you, Steve. Have a great day. Appreciate it. Take care.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.